What's up, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Well Man's Podcast. My name is Brian Brozy. I'm joined by my friend and co-host, Keoni Tita. Keoni, how are you today?
I'm doing good. Let's jump right in because I want to talk about one of my favorite medicinal substances, and that is water.
Yes, the most important.
There's so many types of water. There's so many types of water out there. You know, a lot of people get confused about it. And most of us know that water is very important for health and for our well-being.
Absolutely. Do you track your water intake at all, Keoni?
I try to. I know that, the older we get, we start losing our thirst mechanism. So it's more important the older we get. I'd say it's more important the older we get, and then also assessing, young infants, hydration also. Those would be the two most important things.
Yeah.
But this is not something new. Speaking about water, I mean, water is, well, let's go back to the father of philosophy, right? His name is Thales. Way before Socrates, he believed that the originating principle of nature was water. I mean, that makes sense. It's not actually true, but that makes sense, right? When you look around the world, you see, all life comes from water.
Mm-hmm.
If you live in a desert, you see how desolate it is. There's not a whole lot of water there, so life can't function. So that probably had a lot to do with why he came up with that. But obviously the point of me bringing that up is, well, because we love philosophy, but also because way back then they saw the importance of water.
Yeah.
But Brian, if we really, for our contemporary listeners, if we really want to know the importance of water, I recommend watching The Water Boy by Adam Sandler, that movie. There you'll get a true expert on water, and you will go away with knowing how important it is to drink pure, cool, clean water.
High quality H2O.
High quality H2O. That's exactly right. So anyway, so let's talk about the pros and cons of water, how much we should drink. What are the signs of the dehydration, as Adam Sandler would say in that movie? We'll talk about that. So the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine recommend that men drink on average about 125 ounces of water. And there's a lot of people you hear, well, an ounce is of water, half your body weight in ounces of water, and that type of thing. For women, they say about 91 ounces. That's a little bit more than even I have recommended in my clinic. But you have to also think that we get a lot of water from our food and fluids from, just various drinks that we have. So would drinking coffee hydrate you a little? Yeah, I would say somewhat, even though there's a slight diuretic effect to it. So I think that would count towards that.
Yeah. So speaking of like tracking your water, Keoni, I use an app called Waterminder, and it's a tracker. And it does kind of make that adjustment like you just said about, for instance, if you drink coffee, which we know is a diuretic, but at the same time you are getting some hydration benefit from it. Mm-hmm. And that app does a great job of, I don't know the exact number, but like when I drink water, the exact amount of fluid ounces that I enter is how much I get hydrated. And then when I drink coffee, it's only a percentage of, if I have 12 fluid ounces, maybe I only get 4 or 5 ounces towards actually getting hydrated. But it does a great job of breaking that down for you, just like you're saying.
Yeah, those are great. I love those apps. It's a great thing to use just to make sure you're staying on top of it, because it is very important. I think about how many people go to their doctor or take an over-the-counter medication or something where they're just not feeling well and they think it's something else, when it's really you need to drink more water.
Yeah, and that happens a lot.
That could be the it happens a lot. Like,
it's amazing how little people, especially just even in physical therapy. If you have a session before 11 a.m., the people show up and they haven't had anything to drink all day, Keoni, except for maybe a cup of coffee or something like that. And you're about to physically exercise. Mm-hmm. And that's where all those, the cramps come in, all these adverse effects, because you're not hydrated. It should probably be the first thing you consume in the morning, not your phone, not your Twitter feed, not a cup of coffee, a glass of water.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, your body is pretty much made of water. Your lungs are 83% water. Your brain is, your heart and brain, 73%. Your whole body is pretty much water. Hence Thales and his, thinking that everything comes from water. But it's something that you don't want to take lightly, and it's something that can save your life. So I just want to bring this up. You know, one of the things that I see, especially my older clients, are, you know, they lose their thirst mechanism, or we tend to, the older we get. I'm not really sure why that happens. And there's various ways to mitigate that, like carrying around a water bottle with you, or using this app that you're talking about. But, you know, subclinical dehydration over time is very dangerous to your kidneys. So, you know, you're possibly talking about adding to kidney failure with that. That could be a very real cause of that. And we've talked about in podcasts before about, okay, well, your blood is mostly water, right? Well, how do you keep your blood thin? What's the best way to keep your blood thin? It's drinking water. If you don't have enough water there, you're going to be more likely to clot.
Right. Right.
So this is not something we should take lightly, as Adam Sandler's let us know in the movie.
Absolutely not. And especially being aware of your medications and how those are affecting you, and whether they're going to cause you to have that decreased thirst mechanism or not. And
that's
adjusting
right.
appropriately.
And I'll add to that, those medications actually need water to work better in your body.
Right.
So think about taking a medication when you are dehydrated.
And you did say that the National Academies of Sciences and Engineering and Medicine recommends 3.7 liters, 125 ounces. So that's about a gallon, so people know. A gallon is 128.
So for men, it's about 15 cups. For women, it's about 11 cups. You know, and then there's different scenarios where you're going to need more or less, right?
Yep, exactly.
If you're a pregnant or breastfeeding woman, you need to really pay attention to that. You know, if you are older, you definitely need to pay attention to that. And, you know, as we get older, think about all the achy joints. We've talked about this a lot, right?
Please. Yes.
Water adds that lotion.
Yes, absolutely.
Makes motion easier.
Absolutely. And I'm not 100% certain about this, but I feel like I'm pretty sure that this recommendation is not including you exercising that day. So automatically,
right. or the heat out in the day, humidity level, and all that. The other thing I'll also say, we talk about heat, but actually, you know, in very cold weather, you can become dehydrated easily too, right?
Yeah.
So you have to be aware of that. Sometimes the cold weather is even worse, and that thirst mechanism doesn't kick in as well as it may in heat.
Yeah. And it's amazing how much you see, just as a healthcare provider, people are not drinking water, or people will tell me, you know, I don't drink water. I only drink this or that. And it's like, it's
or have you ever gotten this? I hate water.
Oh yeah. I've heard that one quite a few times.
I was like, bro, you hate water. You wouldn't be here if our ancestors didn't drink water.
You got a real internal conflict there.
You absolutely have a really bad conflict. But anyway, one of the confusing things about water, at least for me, is all the different types of water out there, and is it good or bad for you? You know?
Yeah.
So
it's amazing how you can walk into Walmart and there's 10 jugs of different types of water: spring water, deionized.
Right. So what are all those things? Distilled, carbonated, you know, bottled water. So let's go through those a little bit quickly. So what the hell is spring water? Is that only water you get in the season of spring? No. It's water that comes from a spring, and that's where, you know, it's basically groundwater that flows up through the Earth's surface without a mechanical pump or aid, right? Oh. And I just want to say something about spring water. Spring water, there's actually a website out there, findaspring.com, and you can find various springs around the country that are documented to go fill up jugs of water. And the nice thing about spring water is it tends to have a lot of minerals in it. It tends to have been filtered through the earth. It tends to be, if you from a good source, very clean. And that's the caveat, right? So just any spring, if you're not sure about it, that water definitely needs to be tested for contaminants and things like that.
Right.
But this findaspring.com, usually these are well-known spring sources of water, And the water is completely free. You can go to these springs and just fill up your jug for the most part, I think, unless it's on like private property or something like that. But a lot of these springs are on like national parks or just out there, and they're free sources of water. So if you find I would have to say, like, if you find a spring that you know is a good source of water, that's probably one of the best sources of water to get.
Okay. And you can go get it yourself. And I pulled up that website, Keoni, and there is not a state without a spring that you can go to.
Right. So you find a spring.com. I think there's other websites out there too, but a spring water is really good, and it won't suck an aquifer dry. It won't cause your well to go dry. And in my opinion, if you get good spring water, it is simply the best tasting water and probably the best for your body. Okay. Mm-hmm. But how many people have the time to go to a spring and fill up their jugs of water?
Right.
And then I would say, are you ruining that water when you fill it up in a soft plastic jug and then let it sit around for a while? Because then you get plastic leaching, which is one of the problems of the next water, and that's bottled water, right? Most bottled water is in plastic. And, with one of the things that's going on our planet right now, plastic is everywhere. Mm-hmm. It is everywhere, and it's polluting the planet. It's ruining ecosystems and stuff like that. So I kind of implore people, and again, I'm not good about it either because I'm thirsty. I'll go for a bottle of water that's out of plastic too, but we should strive to at least drink out of things that are better for the environment, like glass or anything like that. But drinking bottled water, you are going to get some microplastics in that water that you're going to drink. Is it dangerous? Well, we don't have any research to show that, that having microplastics from drinking plastic water, whether you taste it or not, you're getting it. We just don't have research on if that's bad or not. From what it seems like, we've been doing it for years, and we just can't make a connection there.
Now, do you get that plastic leaching from all types of plastic bottles, Keoni? Like even if they're like BPA free and that sort of thing, like a blender bottle, for example.
I'm not an expert on this, but as far as I know, you will get some leaching from that. Like, okay.
Or let me just put blender it. Bottle, don't sue us.
Well, yeah,
we didn't say it.
And maybe not. Maybe they've tested their water for that. But typically, you will get leaching. With glass bottles, you don't get that as much. But can we really make the jump to say that it's dangerous for you to do that?
Yeah, no conclusive.
I don't know. Is it natural? No, it's an unnatural form of water. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be dangerous for you. But yeah, if you could drink it out of water, fill up your glass jugs at a spring, that would be a better way to go.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
But here's the benefit of bottled water, right? Usually bottled water is tested for contaminants like bugs, like Giardia, E. coli, that type of thing. Some of the EPA known contaminants, whereas spring water may not be. So you have to weigh that.
Well, and from what I know, like the big conglomerates, their bottled water is generally from springs. Like you can kind of flip it over and see what spring it says that it is from.
Right.
But then again, it is in those plastic bottles for a while.
And you know what? You actually bring up a good point, Brian, with that, because yes, they will say spring water. And now that I'm thinking about it, I got to walk myself back, because I'm thinking that if you have a product and bring it to market like bottled water, the only thing that's regulating that is the FDA. Mm-hmm. And the FDA doesn't require testing, or they may not require testing. Whereas let's go to the next thing. If you're drinking municipal water or tap water in a city, that water has to be tested periodically. Yeah. So now, there's a pro and con there, so you're absolutely right. So I want to walk myself back on that. You would think that these companies do test because, they want to test for taste and all that and make sure their water tastes good. Right. But that may not necessarily be the case, and it's left up to them. Yeah. Where they don't really have somebody regulating them over it,
Yeah. And we see how great our municipal water is in some places too.
Right. So, well, that's a pro for tap water, right? You know that it's getting tested, but it's certain levels, and but again, you cannot test any form of water across the board, right? There are thousands of industrial chemicals out in our environment, and only a smidgen of them get tested via the EPA in municipal water,
right,
or tap water. So, I'm certainly, we know in a lot of tap water that you're getting traces of certain, well, it's actually in our streams too. You're getting traces of certain medications in that water.
Yeah.
You may get traces of pesticides and stuff like that. But we do know that if you drink water from a city in the US, you're probably not going to get Giardia or E. coli.
Right.
You're probably not going to get sick from it.
Right.
Whereas if you go to another country, like a third world country, where you're not used to drinking that water, they probably don't, it's probably not regulated, and you're probably going to get very, very sick from it by drinking that. That's where bottled water really comes in handy, right? If you're traveling abroad and you're not sure about the water source.
Yeah, absolutely. So
that's a pro with tap water, but also a con. We can't test all the chemicals, but that water is being tested. So the water here in Winston-Salem, or where I am, or in Jacksonville where you are, it's being tested, and you can actually call your public utility and get the records of that and what they're actually testing for.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so you can actually do that and see, but keep in mind that this is not a pure form of water either. You're still getting traces of contaminants. So the next form of water that would make sense is a lot of people will buy filters and do filtered water. So what is filtered water? Well, filtered water comes in all types and varieties. It really just depends on the filter. So does the filter just take out, bugs? Does it just take out fluoride or chlorine and that type of thing? Or is it a really super duper double backflip filter that takes out volatile organics and things like that? And that's something that you can buy. And there's all types of filters out there. My water here at home, we get through our refrigerator, which has a charcoal filter on it, which can take out some of the volatile organics, but also we have a water filtration system for the whole house where the water comes in, but that's more getting out like particulates and may get out some bugs. Keep in mind a lot of tap water is coming through pipes. You don't know how old those pipes are.
Yep.
You may get leaching of that. Yep. Part of the problem in Flint, Michigan was because a lot of the, from what I understand, is there was lead piping that leached the lead into the water, which, by the way, is very, very detrimental for young growing brains. Not so much, even though you don't want to drink it for an adult. An adult's body can, handle a little bit more lead than a young growing human body can, right? So that's why it's very important for that. But so filters, you kind of have to do your own research. And I know probably listeners are gonna be like, well, tell us what's the best filter. I really can't. It just depends on what your needs are. I don't, there's pros and cons to all of them. The other thing I would say is before you even get a filter, go get your water tested. Maybe you are on well water. Let's talk about well water, for example. Well water is where you just bore a hole into the earth, right? It's not spring water, because once you hit that hole, it's not really, you need a pump to pump it up out of the ground, so to speak. But depending on where you are, the water table flows just like any water. Right. Is it flowing under a gas station 10 miles away that's been leaking? Yeah. Where you have traces of benzenes, which are known carcinogens and things like that. So just because you're drinking well water does not mean you have a great source of water. In fact, I would say most people, or the EPA would say, it's probably safer to drink well water tap water relative to well water, especially if you don't know about the water at all, right? Mm-hmm. At least we know about tap water. So I grew up on well water. Our water never really got tested. I grew up in Bethania, and I'm not sure. Nobody, I don't even know this, but you can certainly find out. I don't know how that water flowed into that area. I know
Right.
we were at height, and I know it was fairly deep. The deeper it goes, the water tends to be better. But, only a few miles away from most people's homes is a gas station. If that gas station isn't taken care of, a lot of times you will get leaking of that. Maybe you're close to an industrial site, that type of thing. So I think testing the water is great. And you can send your water to get tested, like your state EPA. You can get a sample of water. You can order these things online, like kits. You can get them on Amazon and get your water tested for various stuff to see what's in it.
That's interesting. Yeah, it seems like one of the first steps for figuring out your new water source, or kind of investigating what you're going to do.
Right. I mean, I tell people, like, for the most part, just go to the EPA website, type in home water testing, and a lot of times you can send your water in there. They'll give you other ideas that you can do that. Also, Environmental Working Group website is a good resource for finding out about your water and finding like good ways to test and all that type of thing. Calling your public water utility is also a good way to know a little bit about your water.
Is the Environmental Water Agency, I believe that's what it was called?
Working Group.
The Environmental Working Group?
Yeah, EWG. They're an independent group that
that's what I was going to ask.
Yeah, they're independent. So they test all kinds of cosmetics and water, bottled water. You can find out which water is better, what water is not. They give you all kinds of resources on there.
Okay, great. Yeah, because that's what I think about. Maybe it's the cynic in me, but I don't know how much I trust my EPA to tell me this is safe, because they did that in Flint as well.
Right. Exactly. So you really have to do your own research on water. And I do recommend, getting a filtration system no matter where you are.
Yeah.
There are very few sources of water in the world now that you can just drink out of a stream. I mean, you'd have to go, maybe, I don't know, maybe somewhere in Iceland or maybe remote New Zealand, you can find a source, but I still wouldn't recommend it even then.
Yeah.
Drinking water out of a stream or anything like that. I mean, our planet, is polluted.
Yeah, absolutely. When I started working in college, like full time for the first time, the first paycheck I got and the first big purchase I made was a Berkey water filtration system.
Yeah.
So I would think my health is pretty important to me, just based off 120 podcast episodes on health. And that was probably that was my first purchase when I started making an actual paycheck.
Right. And I think it's so important.
Right.
I mean, I think it's so important. At least you're doing something to.
And I lived somewhere at the time. I lived in Auburn, Alabama, where sure, the water's fine. This. You could drink tap water if you wanted, so on and so forth, and still running that tap water through the Berkey.
Yep, that's right. So we've heard of mineral water, right? So people say, well, mineral water is very healthy for you. And then again, I would say, well, there's pros and cons to that too. Mineral water is just water that has, relative proportions of certain minerals like calcium, magnesium, sodium, and that type of thing in it. And maybe some dissolved solids in it. Mineral water, can be very good to drink if you have a really good source of it, because it will, may add minerals, may help with bone. It may help with your electrolyte balance. It's on a hot day, where you're sweating a lot. If you had to choose between distilled water and mineral water should be your go-to.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are the main mineral waters out there? Well, I think Pellegrino is one. That's one that I kind of like, and there's some other ones out there, Perrier and that type of thing.
But it shouldn't be colored, right, Keoni?
It depends, right?
Okay.
That's one thing to bring up. So, for example, let's say we're probably put off when we're drinking water that has a weird color to it, which is good, but it depends on what's causing that color, right? So, for example, if I drink water that's been filtered through red clay, but yet there's no volatile organics or anything in there, maybe a little bit of iron in there, that may not be so bad. So discoloration of water doesn't mean that it's bad water.
Right.
Now,
but at the
again,
same time, we're not talking about vitamin water.
Right. Right.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah. But again, there's a pro to that, right? So you have some color to the water. You make it look pretty. You're just trying to sell bottled water. You call it vitamin water, add some minerals in there, market it to the public. People like color and variety. So adding a little bit of color to water may help people drink it. May not necessarily be bad for you. Adding a sweetener to it may make you drink a little bit more water than you normally would. So that's a pro. It's not ideal, but you look at these waters like Propel and things like that are sweetened or have artificial sweeteners in there. Well, is it making you drink more water? Would you not drink water if you didn't drink this Propel? Yeah, I know it may be in plastic or whatever, but again, it's all relative to where you are. So maybe Propel may be decent for you for that. I would still say, okay, so Propel has these artificial sweeteners and sugars in there. Well, relative to alcohol or soda, like Pepsi or diet soda, I would say that Propel is much better for you.
Yeah. All where you're at.
Yeah, it's all where you're at.
Do. If you're the person who hates water, somehow we got to get more water in there, whether it's flavored or not.
Right. And so a lot of my patients will drink flavored water. They know they got to get more water in there. They hate water. Like my patient who hated water, that's the thing that got them to drink water. It needed to be flavored and taste sweet or have something like that in there. A lot of mineral water is also carbonated. Carbonated water does not necessarily mean mineral water, but carbonated water is just where carbon dioxide gas is dissolved in the water. So it gives you this bubbly, fizzy, feel to the water. It's almost like it burns your tongue. I actually like the sensation of carbonated water. It actually helps me drink more water. But what are the cons to that? Well, carbonation makes the water slightly acidic. Yeah. All right. So when you have water that's slightly acidic, you can over time possibly leach minerals. Can it have an effect on the teeth? Can it have an effect on bone where you're leaching minerals from it? Yeah, in theory, it certainly can. Yeah. So I would say, if your sole source of water is carbonated water, I'd be like, you need to mix it up a little bit. Even though most stuff out there will say, carbonated water is not a big deal. And I guess it's really the amount. If you're constantly doing it, you may leach calcium from your teeth or bone or whatever. So that's mildly acidic just due to the carbonation. And then on the other hand of it, this is a big fad out there, is alkaline water.
Oh yeah. Right? So this is the one that'll make your genitalia bigger. Yeah. Yeah, this one grows back your foreskin from what I've heard. Keoni, tell me about alkaline water.
Yeah, I mean, water, it's marketed to make you healthy. It's marketed to prevent to prevent cancer. I mean, I'm waiting for it. It's going to be marketed to make your pee-pee bigger. I mean, who knows what it's going to do next? So it's a bunch of hype, really, is what we're getting to, as you can tell, is, making a joke about it, but it really is a bunch of hype. And really, alkaline water is just a water with a higher pH. So it's alkaline. It's more basic than acidic. But, there may be negative side effects to that too. There may be benefit, but again, there's not a whole lot of science talking about the benefit of drinking alkaline water. The whole thing with alkaline water was, the average person eats an acidic based diet, and therefore you drink alkaline water to balance out the acidity. So, and therefore you improve your health, because acidity, having a body that's too acidic, may create disease, especially cancer. But again, the science on this is species at best. All right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very elementary way of coming to the conclusion that it would be beneficial, and then it's a 1+1 type of way of coming up with the conclusion, and then in reality there is a X variable there that is not accounted for,
as with most things, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So alkaline water, well, think about this. Possibly, in theory, if all I drink is alkaline water and I'm drinking that with a meal, does alkaline water then neutralize my stomach pH? right? Because your stomach is acidic, you're drinking alkaline water, you neutralize the acid, and guess what? Maybe that Giardia bug or some type of bug that is in your food doesn't get killed in the stomach acid, which then can make you sick. I'm just thinking out loud here, but that stomach acid is there for a reason, to help
Yeah.
dissolve minerals, to help you assimilate. So over time, you don't want to, you want that that low pH, the acidity in the stomach, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So it's just like taking an acid blocker, like,
Yeah. Like a
I don't know,
Tums.
like a Tums or what. If you do that over time, it may give you some problems.
Yeah.
So my whole thing is, yes, alkaline water, drinking it every now and then, just, and having carbonated water. Yeah, they're probably fine. I just would not make that your sole source of water, all the time. And there are people who, evangelize alkaline water. Like, it's the only water you should drink. I remember years ago, I was driving, I forget where I was going, but I was somewhere in the West, and I was driving with, this fellow doctor friend of mine, and we had to stop at different places that had alkaline water. That's the only thing she would drink, and and again, it's a lot of hype. I just don't agree with that.
Yeah.
Another type of water you'll see out there, this is all marketing stuff, but purified water is just water that's been purified through some process. So it's like the filter on your tap at home. That's a form of purified water, using reverse osmosis, microfiltration, ultrafiltration, using ultraviolet light to decontaminate your water. By the way, I don't know if people know this, but water is naturally, regular natural water that runs through a stream or river, that the act of the water flowing over rocks and things like that, as well as sunlight hitting that water on flowing water, is the natural way water gets decontaminated. So that's why some processes will use ultraviolet light to help purify water.
Yeah.
Purify water. So distilled water, I guess you can put deionized water under there too. So what's the difference between distilled water and deionized water? Because you see that too. Right. Distilled water is basically water that's been boiled, and you collect the steam and you condense it, and it will take out a lot of minerals and things like that. Like, there's should not be anything in the water unless it has volatile organics in it, right? So if you're distilling water that has gasoline residues in there, you're getting the gasoline residues in that distilled water. Maybe not the minerals, but you may be getting that in the water.
Right? Wow, that's interesting. And I do know that distilled water isn't the best as far as like overall hydration goes. A few years, this like 10 or so ago, the UFC, the Ultimate Fighting, cage fighting people, Keoni, they have to like make these massive weight cuts to make 145 pounds the night of the fight or whatever the case may be. And they were rehydrating with distilled water, and then their bodies kind of shut down because they'd leached. You go through this huge period of dehydrating yourself and losing as much water weight as possible, and then they were rehydrating with distilled water, and they didn't have any of the electrolytes or the minerals or the things to actually get them going at a proper performance. And that's a big thing I've seen with distilled water, is you're not necessarily getting anything but the H2O, and then apparently possibly any of those organics that you do not want.
Oh, and in that scenario you just told us about, you're talking about, okay, so you're drinking a lot of water to help lose weight or urinate or whatever, you're getting dehydrated, you're sweating a lot, and then you rehydrate, right?
You're right, with nothing
with
that's
distilled
hydrating.
Water, sweating and drinking tons of water will cause electrolyte imbalance, no matter what, is really, if you drink too much water, whether it's mineral water or whatever, it can cause electrolyte imbalance. And then on top of that, you rehydrate with distilled water.
Right.
That can be a big problem.
Right.
So yeah, absolutely. You certainly have to watch that. One thing I'll just bring up here is, we already told about this. Yeah, don't drink water out of a pond or a stream. I mean, there are plenty of things, like you can even find like simple filtration devices at REI and stuff like that, where you can put it through this pump or filter, and then you can probably, if you're going on a camp trip, then you can probably drink that water.
Yeah.
Don't just sip the water out of a water stream. You're asking for problems.
Yeah, absolutely. I bought as a gag gift 2 or 3 years ago. I bought my girlfriend a life straw. You
Yeah.
seen those, Keoni?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
But
mean,
we know.
I don't know what I'm sure, they're marketed and they do the things that they say, but yeah, that's better than nothing,
Yeah, absolutely. Better than nothing.
Right.
Absolutely. We didn't essentially boil down what the difference is between distilled and deionized. Can we boil that down a little bit more? I
Right.
know
So,
deionized is what I'm using in chemistry class all the time.
right. So deionized water is, just think about what that means. You're taking all the ions out of there, and that it's basically, if you looked at deionized water and distilled water, and considering the distilled water is is a pure water where there's no contaminants like volatile organics in it, you really can't tell the difference if you're a scientist, from what I understand. Just looking at 2 bottles of water, whether it's deionized or distilled, they're essentially the same for the most part if the water
Okay.
sources are pure. It's just the way you go about it is a little bit different. Distilled
Gotcha.
is you're boiling the water to vaporize it and condense it. Deionized is where you're using like an electron exchange polyresin that you run the water through.
That
I don't
makes
know if I had
sense
that
why
terminology
it's
right,
used
but
in
anyway.
my reactions.
Yeah, right. So, and both of those waters, types of water, are great for using in chemistry labs and things like that.
Right.
They're definitely water. They're both forms of water you can certainly drink, but again, I'm partial to a pure source of spring water as the best source of water.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
those waters you can certainly drink, and probably not have a lot of problems with that. But if you're eating a healthy diet and change up your water intake with different types of water, you shouldn't run into too many problems with that.
Yep.
But,
Yeah.
think about what's the energy required to make distilled water or to deionize the water. We've talked about this on certain podcasts, right? We talked about this brings me back to Jade and Stoic philosophy, right? One of the things we talked about with that was, as somebody who's trying to abide by Stoic philosophy, you think about every action that you do in life. Ask yourself the question: is this ethical? Is the question, right? How am I affecting the planet, right? So you can use this with anything in life. So I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but for example, if everybody decided to, take their bottle of water and after they're done with it, throw it on the ground, think about what a mess the world would be, right?
Yeah.
So
we probably have an island of trash floating.
Right. We'd be inundated with plastic bottles if it wasn't put in a trash can or anything. So the same question can be asked with anything. So maybe deionized water is great, but what are the consequences down the road?
Right.
What are the consequences down the road of drinking bottled water all the time? Not only for your health, but for the planet. So anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's just something, I strive, and I know you do too, to, kind of ask yourself, like, what are my actions doing?
Right.
And once you get in the habit of doing that, you just become better. I don't know. I think you become better.
Next level human.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Next level human. There you go, Jay. There's your plug. Even though he needs no plug. He's doing a good job himself.
Talk about the Wellman's podcast, Jade. We love you.
Yeah. Please. So we need the plugs. Talk about the Wellman's podcast. But anyway,
I agree.
Yeah. So anyway,
Completely.
So then there's things out there. You've heard of soft water and hard water. Like I really had no idea what that meant. I mean, but hard water, once you understand it, makes sense. It just has a high mineral content. So in a sense, it's mineral water, but it's the type of minerals that are in there. And most of the time it's like, calcium and magnesium carbonates and things. And when you hard water is kind of the water that you may use in washing and stuff, and where you start seeing scum on like the bathtub and stuff, soap scum and stuff. That's where the water may have a high mineral content. So hardness of water may have a detrimental effect on your appliances in your home if it's really hard. That's why you see a lot of these companies say, oh, here's a water softener to take some of these minerals out of there. it's really not great for cleaning. Like if you're washing your dishes in a dishwasher and you have very hard water, you may see like residue on there that may be indicative of the hardness of the water.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like those minerals bind with the soap and cause that soap scum, so to speak, that coats things, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anyway, and then hard water is also kind of the water that, you know, makes you feel like if you're washing with it, it makes you like you have to do on your hands or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
And then soft water contains low concentrations of ions, particularly not having a whole lot of calcium, magnesium in there. They may have other things in there, but particularly that. Soft water, if you wash with soft water, you get a really nice lather of soap and stuff like that in there. Yeah, I guess if you ever gone to the beach and like took a shower like near the coast or whatever, maybe, you know, being in Jacksonville, I don't know, maybe the water's more hard there or whatever, but you ever feel,
yeah, like you got
like
that layer of
like
film.
Like the soap doesn't come off or something.
Exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, those are the differences. So soft water, if you're from an area with hard water, a lot of times you know, it may be energy efficient for your home to have a water softener installed in your house, you know, that softens the water. So therefore the life of your appliances work better. The water pipes bringing water into the house are better, that type of thing.
Is it when you're closer to the coast, Keoni, are you more likely to have hard water, or was that just an example? Like
that's just an example.
Okay.
That was just an example. And I just wanted to, because it really depends on where you're getting the water source from. It's not necessarily the coast.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And also you may have a water softener there anyway. So it's not always that way. Now contrast that with what the hell is heavy water? You know, now we're getting into some types of water that, you know, are used in industry and also in nuclear reactors and things like that. So, you know, one type of water is just basically what it means. Forgive me, guys. I mean, I'm not an expert in chemistry, but I'll do my best. Water, the chemical symbol of water is H2O, right? And
looks like Mickey Mouse.
Right. Okay. So water is made up of hydrogen and oxygen. Typically the hydrogen, that's the two hydrogens that are bound to the oxygen are just regular hydrogen, meaning they have one proton and no neutrons. All right. So just one proton. I think it's the only element that has like one proton where it doesn't have a counterpart neutron to it. All right. So heavy water is naturally occurring in regular water. Okay. So one type of heavy water is called deuterium, if I'm pronouncing that right. Basically what that is that's water where the hydrogen bound to the oxygen has one proton and one neutron in there, and the chemical symbol is a superscript of H2. It's heavy water. Like it's atomic, am I saying this right? Its atomic mass is heavier than regular hydrogen. Okay, so that's why it's called heavier water. It has that extra neutron making it heavier.
Yeah, right. By molecular weight.
Right. That and deuterium is actually water that you know, you in small amounts you can actually drink, and it is naturally occurring, but it's used a lot
within an industry. Yeah.
Okay. You do not want to drink this water. You do not want to find pure sources of deuterium, because think about what's going on. Your body is used to drinking regular water. That's water that has hydrogens of just one proton on it, right? Which is what most of the water is relative to heavy water. When you go get a fresh water source or tap water, you're drinking typically non-heavy water, even though you have these other isotopes of hydrogen in the water, right?
I wish I could make sure you're 100% right, but yes.
Okay, good. That's what I need so I can go on, because I may be going off on a tangent where I'm not stating any of this right, but nevertheless, from my understanding, if you're drinking deuterium water, basically your body is not used to that isotope of hydrogen. So at a molecular level, it can cause problems, even though it's not radioactive. All right.
Okay.
All right. There's another type of water that's heavy water. It's called super heavy water, and that's tritium. Tritium, and basically tritium tri. That basically means now we have water that has the hydrogen has one proton and two neutrons. So you have three. So it's called tritium. Again, this is water that's used in industry, used in nuclear reactors. I'm not sure how. Maybe I should actually get my brother on who actually works in a nuclear plant to tell us all about this stuff. But anyway, that's considered super heavy water. That water is radioactive. So if you had a glass of that water, or spilled that water and you were in front of it, it has beta radiation, which basically can't pierce the body. So it's safe outside, but it's definitely not safe drinking it. This is not water you want to drink. But even though when you drink water, you're getting trace, I don't know the amounts of both deuterium and tritium. So that's heavy. Those are heavy waters. You won't see any of that sold in stores, nor should you.
Yeah.
So, and then you can have super, super heavy water, but these things are not naturally occurring. These things can be made by, via industry.
Yeah.
I think that's it. Are there any other types of water we should talk about?
So, not that I know of, but I do have to say my favorite morning water cocktail to kind of initiate in the beginning of the day is that like 16 ounces of room temperature water, a little bit of pink Himalayan sea salt, a squeeze of like half a lemon, and then stir all that up and start my day. And somehow we know that the water is going to follow the salt. I feel more hydrated. I drink more throughout the day. There's something about that cocktail that in the morning just kind of kickstarts me and I feel it. It's almost like, when you wake up and you feel real brain fogged, or you just feel like, today's going to be real slow. It's something about that cocktail really does it for me. So I would suggest people try that.
I'm so glad you brought this up, because when you actually think about what is the most hydrating water there is, I would have to say to be hydrated, truly hydrating, you have to get the water into the cells, right?
Yep.
One way to get the water into the cells is to mineralize it, right?
Yep.
And that's the pinch of salt or whatever you're doing with that water.
Yeah.
So that's why you'll see things like Gatorade, who has all these ions in there. We know that that Gatorade, compared to certainly distilled water or any other type of water, is probably more hydrating.
Yeah.
Right? So mineral water is going to be more hydrating as long as you don't have so much sodium in there where you're actually pulling water out of the cells.
Right.
So that's a really good point.
Back to the balance.
Right. And then the other thing is, so you're putting a squeeze of lemon in there, you're adding taste to the water.
Yeah.
Okay. So it may help you drink more. I'm not, and also you're adding other minerals from the actual juice of the lemon or orange or whatever you're doing.
Yep. And notice how it's more acidic, not alkaline. Yeah. No wonder why I have such a small baby pee-pee. It's like water cocktail.
That whole thing's interesting on alkaline and acidic water. Yes. You're adding citric acid to water. And if you do that over time, you may leach, minerals from your teeth by constantly drinking lemon squeezed or lime squeezed water in there. But other people would say, well, the effect of citric acid coming from a lemon or lime actually has more of an alkalizing effect on the body, on the total body. So
that's why it's so big. Thank you, Jamie.
Right.
I was wrong.
Yeah. So it depends. Now, if you're gargling with lemon water all day and using that as a mouthwash, I wouldn't recommend that. You're going to leach, some of your tooth enamel and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And my favorite way is just like, even just from a low level personal training perspective of getting people to intake more water, is starting with it in the morning. I always tell people to have a bottle beside their bed or a glass beside their bed so you can down it first thing in the morning. It'll be room temperature. It won't upset your stomach or kind of shock the system like a cold water would that early in the morning, and start your metabolism nice and early in the morning. I've seen people at school who have water bottles that light up every hour that tell you to take a sip. The way I do it is I use that water minder app, like I've mentioned, and I've got I don't know, I've probably got 6 blender bottles, and those are 28 ounces when you fill them. And I just add it to the Waterminder app when I finish one and try and get to basically a gallon every day, or a little over a gallon.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think having those apps, carrying a bottle around with you, if you just can't stand the taste of water, water should be tasteless. But if you need some taste to it, add lemon or lime. If you don't have the time to do that and you're just not going to drink water unless it's sweetened or flavored with something, then you certainly can do that. I think it's better to do that than not to drink.
Absolutely.
I'll say another thing. We talked about this. Like, I do think room temperature water is probably the best to drink in most situations. But, if you want a little bit of extra advantage to help your body burn some calories, then drink ice water, because your body has to warm it up. And to do that, it's going to burn some calories to help you warm that up over time. So, but yeah, room temperature water is probably the best thing to do. Dehydration is a big deal. It's a huge deal, especially the older we get. You see a lot of it happening in retirement communities, just older people in general. Think about preventing blood clots. Think about keeping your kidneys healthy. Think about keeping your heart healthy. Thinking about allowing good blood flow, preventing headaches,
UTIs, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Think about not being fatigued.
Yes.
Just think about not being less irritable. Water can have a total effect on all of that stuff, on just your general well-being. So
yeah, at really dehydrated levels, I've seen older adults look like they're in delirium because of dehydration. So absolutely.
The other thing are kidney stones. Kidney stones. If you're dehydrated, kidney stones are more likely to form. You're more likely to get urinary tract infections if you're not drinking water too. Yeah, I'm sure you see this a lot, right? Like with older clients with injuries and stuff like that. Water is great for your joints, as we said before.
And then we're unable to get much out of therapy because you're so dehydrated at that point. And it's a challenge. So absolutely. Right. Absolutely.
And again, like we've been stating, you can't rely on your thirst mechanism to tell you when you're dehydrated.
100% correct.
You just can't do that.
Especially on medication.
Especially on medication. However, there are some signs or symptoms, thirst being one of them, less frequent urination, dark colored urine may be indicative of you being dehydrated a little bit, fatigue, dizziness, confusion, that type of thing.
Real quick, I feel like we'd be remiss if we didn't mention just your urine should be clear.
Yeah.
It should be clear. Maybe a small yellow hue.
Yeah, it should be a clear straw colored thing. It shouldn't be cloudy or dark.
Yes. Right. Or deep yellow or rich in yellow. Absolutely.
Yeah. And if you're consistently getting that, even with drinking water, then that's time to check in with your doctor. You need to go check in with your doctor about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing I also want to say, because water brings me back to one of my near-death experiences, is, I think I talked about this before, but, when I was in Ukraine years ago, I ate something that just gave me awful food poisoning. Anyway, throwing up, diarrhea coming out of both ends. When you have that happening, it's very, very difficult to get anything down. Mm-hmm. All right. Like even water to get get down. And very, very quickly you can become out of balance with your electrolytes very quickly, like sometimes within hours. So that is a case of where you have to, that can be an emergency case where you need IV fluids and I didn't have access to that at the time. And I was so tired, I couldn't even get out of the hotel room. But that is where you need to, suck on some ice cubes or whatever. But you also, this is where you need to add your Himalayan salt, that needs to come in there, or put it on your tongue with some water, that type of thing, so that you can help restore that, or drink something that, that you can keep down, that type of thing. So diarrhea of 24 hours or more can be very dangerous. Throwing up of 24 hours or more can be life-threatening. So that's something you really have to be aware of. And, you may make things worse, right, if you're drinking distilled water or deionized water.
Right.
Try to
Absolutely.
fit that off.
Absolutely. And correct me if I'm wrong, Keoni, but as far as I know, you can certainly have like an acute overload of water and it could be potentially deadly. But we're talking your gallons and gallons and gallons of water without urinating. But other than that, there is a pretty good system as far as just urinate. You're other than you're drinking gallons and gallons and gallons and trying to hold it and not pee. Other than that, in general, fairly good system at regulating the water. You're not going to drink too much.
Right. You remind me of something, I think it was a decade ago, maybe it's 5 years ago, where this radio station was doing this water drinking contest. You remember that?
Yeah, it was Hold Your Wii to Win a Wii, the Wii video game system, if I remember correctly.
Is that right? Okay,
yeah.
I didn't know that. But somebody actually ended up dying, and a lot of people ended up becoming close to that death from drinking water.
Yep, and that's so much water to the point where your brain is swelling. That's what happened. So you're talking a ton of water. But you know, there is always.
But yeah, and it can happen within hours. So think about it.
Yes.
You know, then that's why we talk about drinking water throughout the day. Like you don't want to wake up in the morning, drink a gallon of water. The next hour, drink a gallon of water. The next water, you know, hour, do it again. You're gonna, you know, kill yourself. And then you're gonna go up to the pearly gates, and they're gonna be like, "What the hell? You fucking killed yourself drinking water. That's a dumb way to die." Like that's one of my missions. I don't want to die of something stupid, and that's a stupid way to die.
Well, everyone, be well until next week. Drinking too much water is a stupid way to die. Dehydrating is also not good.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Take care, everybody. Be well.